I get to introduce our next speaker, which actually is me. So it's a very bizarre thing. He's really handsome. I should tell you about our next speaker. He's just incredible. So what we're going to do today, we've got some workshops. Actually, at 11, we're going to have some mentoring that will happen, sort of live mentoring on the pitching. So we'll have a couple of mentors up front here, and we'll have up to 6 companies have a chance to give their pitch. We'll have another opportunity for that this afternoon, and it will be really fun. And I think you'll get a lot of really good information around this. So I need to get just a little more comfortable. Usually I do this to music, but I need to get just a little more comfortable to give this speech. So sometimes there's dollar bills, it's a whole. So it's very embarrassing. But you really need to wear the proper attire to give a talk about battle scars you have as an entrepreneur. So maybe this makes sense. For those that English isn't your first language, Americans use the word shit in a lot of different ways. Most of us, unfortunately, think of it as an unpleasant term. But some might say he's a good shit, which is certainly not meant to be negative. And so selling shit doesn't mean that you're selling bad things. Selling shit means that you're actually creating sales. You're creating value for somebody. And so I'm going to share 5 thoughts. And these come from a lot of battle scars. Actually, in December, we made a decision to close a company we had been working on for 3 years. That's not an easy decision. And so some of what I'm going to share today has a little bit to do with that. It has to do with some of the mentoring I've done over the last several years in terms of some of the things I see companies be challenged by. So hopefully you find it helpful. There's just 5 thoughts. Hopefully it rings true in some way. So we'll talk about winning. That'll be specific to Startup Turkey or events like this. We'll talk about investment, revenue, prospects. We work a lot with companies that, and I see this a lot when I mentor, is people don't really understand what a prospect is. We'll talk about that. And I don't mean this in a negative or bad way, but the problem is it's really hard to get something you can't define well. And then the business model canvas, a very complicated, simple diagram. It looks very simple because it's only 9 blocks, but there is more on that piece of paper and more value on there, I think, than a lot of people sort of associate with it. And consequently, I think it's maybe not being used as well as it could be. So winning, I mean, the whole idea of this event and events like this is, somebody wins at the end. And unfortunately, the statistics aren't really in our favor, right? So we hopefully get to the finish line and we can celebrate, and that's a really good thing. But the kind of the reality check is, there's only 1 in 100 that are going to win Startup Turkey. So what are the other 99 or 59, whatever the sort of the total number of participants are? What are the, is it possible for the other, sort of the majority to win as well? And so what are the things that you can come out of this with to make it a really good experience, to make it something, ultimately your goal, and it's nice to win, but the winners actually build a valuable business. That's what creates, sort of creates the sort of outcome you want. Winning a trophy or getting good PR one day is not necessarily, does not a good business make, as they say. So this is interactive here. So what is winning for you here? What is success? I'm sorry. Meeting people, that's one. Yep, that's great. Getting to the next level, I like that a lot. Yep, yes, sir. Building the network, absolutely. Yeah. What else? Making an impact, I like that a lot. Yep, absolutely. What else? Yes. Getting new ideas, for sure. What else? Those are all good to start with, right? So ultimately here, we want to make sure that, and it's, you see online and, in print, the agenda, what the sort of we've planned for you, but ultimately each of you should have your own agenda as well. And so there may be people that you should, go take down to Starbucks and have a more intimate meeting with, one where you can actually find partnerships, find opportunities to work together and those types of things. So the events agenda shouldn't necessarily be your agenda, and you need to plot your own course and make sure that you walk out and can celebrate at the end that you've won. And that's a really important part of this. And yeah, it's almost like going to a gym. Nobody goes to the gym and uses all the equipment, right? So you use the equipment that aligns with the outcome you want. So it's the same here. The team at Etuhum is built an incredible gym. Just find get the personal trainer that will get you in the program that's appropriate for you. Somehow I'm not, probably hitting the wrong button, that's why. So investment, almost 100% of the people I talked to on the boat yesterday, that was their sort of number one sort of goal. It's also kind of a challenge, right? So we see this, this horse, how do I get the money? And as soon as I get the money, we're gonna be great, right? Sell shit. So unfortunately, and I see this, I get to travel a ton and get into a lot of ecosystems, is the ecosystem in general has just sort of been selling this weird myth, this idea that you have to raise money in order to have a business or to have a successful business. And it's sort of this 1, 2, 3 approach, right? You've maybe heard it before. So you have an idea, you raise money, you buy a yacht, right? That's what you've been sold. It may not be quite that easy. I did mention the business that we closed in December. Not that easy. So it's really all good, and we kind of get to another 1% here. Only 1% of companies raise angel or venture funding. It's not a big number. And if you're not in North America, the percentages are a bit smaller. So I'm not, hope is not really a plan. How many people have won the lottery here? So we're not talking about a much better percentage. So it's something where if that is your business plan, if your success is dependent on getting investment, it's going to be a long and possibly very difficult road. But if it's based on how do we create value, how do we generate, test our business and get some early revenue, some early adopter revenue, it may be quite a bit easier. So yeah, oh shit, right? Shit comes up more. This is not necessarily a negative term, but the idea is we can't rest on that. So we tend to, and I think every culture has different ways of sort of assigning challenge or of even creating a situation where people feel bad. I think in the U.S., the West Coast tends not to really have a problem with failure so much as on the East Coast, where there's sort of a bigger challenge around that. There, people feel, I think there's more of an association of a negative with failure, when on the West Coast it's much more embraced as a step in the process of getting better and improving the model. And I think other cultures around the world, you tend to see maybe more of an East Coast approach where failure can be a real negative. And in not getting venture capital or angel funding, it doesn't mean you have a bad business. It just means that your business isn't going to pay somebody back 5 to 10 times in the next 3 to 5 years. That's an amazing business that will pay somebody back and that they have that expectation. But most businesses don't have that growth capability. So again, it can be a very good business, it can make somebody a very good living, but it may not be investable, which is, it's totally different than is it a good business or not. And yeah, the idea of getting investment before you have product market fit or validation is really challenging, and revenue is the best way to sort of assure that you have product market fit, right? So has anyone here ever gone in to your boss and said, hey, I just wanted some feedback, or maybe there's an annual review where they give you some feedback and you get all these wonderful comments. Have you had that experience before? You get these, sort of, you're doing great, attaboy, attagirl, keep going, that type of thing. This is, just so you all know, I know it's early, this is yes, this is no. Have you had a good feedback? So imagine the next day, right, you go in and you say, well, thank you for that great review. I'd like to get a raise. Do you think your feedback would be different? Suddenly it would become very honest, right? You would get, so that's really the difference between asking somebody what they think of your idea and asking them to buy it. So you get so many false positives when you ask people, what do you think? And as a mentor, I get asked all the time. In fact, I got asked a couple of times yesterday on the boat, what do you think of my idea? I don't freaking know. What have you sold? How would I possibly know? And whatever I would say is wrong. So don't sort of count on that. Do not sort of put all your marbles into what I think about your idea. Put all your marbles into asking customers to buy. And so we want to, if investment is a track you want, the only way to de-risk it for an investor and to look attractive is to actually have sales. I mean, it's pretty simple. If you're med tech or energy tech, obviously there's a longer track, but most sort of mortal businesses need to have sales. So revenue, selling shit. Yeah, it's about sort of assembling progressively better, a ramp of sales. So that's kind of what we want to create. So revenue provides a whole bunch of things for us. Number one, it's fuel for the business. It's, money you earn, you spend a lot different, right? If somebody gives you money, has anyone ever given you money? Are you as concerned about how you spend that or how you conserve it as money you earn, right? So you want to make sure that, that money earned really is something where, again, it's a resource that you have. And sometimes we squander resources, and sometimes we conserve them. And ultimately, money, just like time, is an incredible fuel. Validation. So obviously, when somebody pays us, it's great assurance that they want what we have. We're solving a problem that's meaningful for them. And something we found, again, having closed a business recently, something we found in that process is that if the problem we were trying to solve wasn't in who we perceived we were trying to sell to, who our customer segment was, if it wasn't in their top three, then they weren't a prospect. If it wasn't in the top three things that they were trying to solve, then they weren't a prospect. And so that's an amazing, at least for me anyway, that was an amazing learning because you have this, we project sort of a need onto people. We sort of want to convince them that they have a need, but ultimately we can't do that. That absolutely, again, when we ask them for money, we're really clear that they have a problem when they hand over hard-earned money. So yeah, customer engagement, getting customers involved in the process. Certainly, we know their commitment when they give us money. We have very little knowledge of their commitment when they don't. This is an interesting build. And then our team confidence. One of the things we see all the time in our company, it's called Meet, and we help international companies come into the US and scale through trade shows and events. And it depends on the company. It may be a year, it may be 2 years, but if the company doesn't have good traction, what ends up happening is they start losing a lot of their team members. We almost envision it like an hourglass that the sand is leaking out of. Sort of once they come to the US, and I think this is like any market entry or any startup in your country, is you've got this team, there's great energy around it, people are excited to get involved, but if there's not traction, if they're not seeing market adoption, the A players, the best people on your team are going to start finding other opportunities. It's just like sports, right? You see players, whether you watch football, soccer, any of the sports, you see players jumping ship to go to better teams where there's better opportunity, where they can win a championship. We see it a lot the same with the companies we work with, where if that sales traction not only is great fuel and validation and all that, but man almighty, it gets people locked into being a part of the vision, right? So they've all come on board because they see this opportunity. Maybe they have some equity, maybe they get commission, whatever the case is. But if that traction doesn't happen, it can be a real challenge. So yeah, and then again, if it ends up that investment is the right thing for you, you're going to de-risk it. You'll certainly de-risk buying the product for your customers. If you have some reference customers, some testimonials and things like that of people that used it, each new customer, it's a little lower bar in terms of what it will take to sell them and bring them on board, because there are others that have adopted whatever your solution is. And so having sales, again, you could have millions and millions of dollars of investment, but sales creates those references for any future buyers or investors. Okay, so this is, I actually want to kind of slow down a little bit on this part, because this is, you know, as if you're sort of buying into the, you know, the first couple of thoughts here, identifying your prospect is really, really, really important, because all of us have limited resources, we have limited time, so being very accurate on who you're aiming for does a lot of things. Number one, it allows you to conserve those resources, but also it allows you to test. Because anything we're going to sort of assume around who our prospect is a hypothesis, right? So again, so we define words commonly. What's a hypothesis? An assumption? Right. Yeah, it's an assumption you think is true. And everything, I mean, I heard a lot of ideas yesterday in terms of what people are going to be pitching, but you know, not so many businesses, which is, it's okay, you go through that, you know, various stages, but yeah, you have this hypothesis, and everything that we do needs to be tested, but the more specific you can be on who your prospect is, the easier it is to do testing. When I say testing, I'm thinking what's called A/B testing or ABCD testing, but essentially, you know, having one hypothesis of who you're selling to, and maybe having a second and a third and a fourth, and beginning to create tests to identify who the best prospect is today, who are going to be the early adopters. And then, of course, once you know who your prospect is, then you can create the messaging that attracts them, so your value proposition, your offer, and so on. So there are three attributes. Really, it seems simple, and you would assume that this is obvious, but it actually isn't. So to give you a quick story, so with our company, we will do an onboarding meeting with new clients, and we usually sort of have it's a 3-hour meeting. It's, you know, a good investment on both sides. And the first question we ask is, who do you sell to? And who we're doing business with are companies that have been around for, you know, 5, 10 years maybe, and they're sophisticated. They have, you know, good market traction in their home market. And we spend probably the next 2 hours trying to nail down who they're selling to, because it's not clear in their head. They're not able to articulate it. And again, when we get to the end of the conversation, we don't really know that's who they should be selling to. It's the hypothesis, but it takes a while to get to. So this is, while it may seem simplistic here, hopefully by the end of it, you'll see that there's much more to it and much more value in it. So three qualities that create a prospect. Anyone have one of them? Say that? Traction? No, not necessarily. So let's say need, right? So they have a need. They're willing to pay for it, so they have money, right? What else? Market. So need, they have money. What else would a prospect have? Motivation, yeah, urgency. That's awesome. Okay, so they have need, money, and the easy way to think about this is you could say need money now, but if you sort of get that, it makes things much simpler. So, and maybe a way to make this a little more clear is, let's talk about fishing, because actually, when you talk to people that fish, this is the best example I could give as to how you get focused. So, when you talk to somebody that fishes, what do you think? What's the first decision they make after they decide to go fishing? What to fish? Yeah. So what do they want to catch? Now that seems like it's kind of a simple thing. Well, it's actually not, right? So they decide, what do they want to catch? So this is just the freshwater fish in North America. They're about, depending on who you listen to, there's somewhere between 20,000 and 34,000 species of fish. There are also subspecies. So let's just, for the sake of argument, let's say there's roughly 100,000 species and subspecies of fish, which they're happening. So the idea here is somebody who goes fishing says, I'm not going to catch 99,999 types of fish. I'm only going to catch this one. They're very focused, and from that, what else, once they have the type of fish decided, what then next do they decide? Yeah, where are they? Where are the fish? Location, absolutely. And then what's the third? Bait. What am I going to put in the water? Yeah, so you guys get it, right? So now do that with your businesses. This seems so simple now. This is really friggin' hard. Companies that have good traction can't answer this question. They're wasting tons and tons and tons of money on aiming at people that are not prospects. Have you ever tried to talk somebody into something they don't need? It's painful, right? We project need on people. We hope that they have a need. They don't. Or they may have a need and they may have money, but they're not urgent, right? It's not in their top 3 list. They're dealing with other fires. They're dealing with other stuff that's critical to them. We can't create urgency. They have to have it. So my wife and I, for a few years, bought and sold some businesses. And one of the businesses we bought, it was to turn around, was a weight loss business. It was really funny, really interesting, because just before that, we had owned a bunch of ice cream businesses. So we went from the drug dealer to the rehab center. It was a very, very, very strange thing, right? And we actually saw some of the same people. It was really weird. So it was amazing. Every once in a while, we'd have a spouse come in, either a wife or a husband, and they'd say, I'd really like to talk to you, I'd like to have you talk to my spouse about losing weight. Are you friggin' kidding me? What? No, never. They have to come, they have to want to lose weight. They have to want, and it's not about losing weight, it's about being healthy, right? But you can't convince somebody, you may want them to lose weight, you may want them to be taller. I'm sorry, I don't have that power. Most of being successful in anything is what's between your ears. It's not, it's nothing else. So if they have the interest and the passion, just have them come and see us. But yeah, we can't do that. It's not, if you have friends that smoke or whatnot and you don't, you can't talk them into not smoking, right? That's, unless they, when they want to, they'll, if they need help, they'll seek it and all that. So yeah, be careful, because you end up seeing people and projecting this, what you think is either a need or urgency onto them. Money is always hard to assess whether they have it or not. You sort of find it when you ask for it. But the need and urgency, you can't figure out until you ask them to make a decision, and then it becomes kind of apparent whether they do or not. And so you can learn a variety of sort of questions that you would ask to get to that place, is to more quickly find out if they have a need. So yeah, success starts with figuring out your target fish, and really your whole business is built around one of 2 things. And actually the last thought is about how do we sort of figure out these 2 things? And that's the business model canvas. So this is what you all are used to seeing, right? Is anyone not familiar with the business model canvas? So and it's an incredible tool. The problem is, this is a 30 to 50 page business plan put on one piece of paper. It looks exceptionally simple, and we go, oh gosh, let me start at the beginning and I'll just fill everything out in it, and this is my business plan. I think it's a real challenge. And in my first startup event, when it was probably, 8 years ago or something, and we sat down, and the instruction was, in the next 54 hours, we're going to fill this thing out. And I'm sorry, that was wrong. And I think, I think it's sort of, again, it's sort of a global ecosystem. We're leading all of us down the wrong path. I think a much saner way to do this is just focus on value proposition and customer segment. Don't do, it's like playing, everyone know what Monopoly is? Have you guys played that before? So, at some point you don't pass go, do not collect $200, all that stuff. Do not collect your $200, don't pass go before you answer and have validated that you have a problem worth solving for a customer segment. If it's not a problem, if you haven't validated it's a problem worth solving, then that's okay. You've saved yourself tons of time and money. That's good. Find something. Ultimately, use one of these as, sort of the idea is one is a variable and one is a constant, right? So figure out, maybe you have a passion for serving a certain customer segment. So let's make sure we define this right. So what's a customer segment? Yeah, the market that you want to enter, the people you want to sell to, or the businesses you want to sell to. That's, and being, again, think about the fish, right? You're going to be really specific. I want to catch a striped bass. Not any bass, a striped bass. One of 100,000 species and subspecies, right? I want to catch that one. So that's your customer segment. And it's a very specific persona that you're aiming at. And then value proposition. What's a value proposition? Yeah. Yeah. So it's what, and it's not from your point of view. A value, and this is where I think a lot of people get confused. A value proposition is from the buyer's point of view. What is it they realize because they have your product or service? What changed in their world because of your product or service? So, and so getting those two right, and you can have one as a variable and one as a constant. It really doesn't matter which. You might have a problem that you've assumed, a theory, and you're trying to find the right customer segment for that, and you can test which one makes sense. Or you can have a customer segment and then find the value proposition that is in their top 3 list, something that you can solve. I have a friend that just sold a business for $130 million, and they assembled their team. They know who they're selling to. That's sort of the first thing they figure out. So they figure out which fish, and then they find out what's the pain that customer segment has, and they go build something that fits them. And he's done this. I think he's had like 4 very similar exits, and he's on to his 5th now. But it's this very similar model. They've assembled the team. They've got tons of VC backing before they even know what the heck they're going to do. And it's just because they've found this model that works really well. And the rest of us, it's the difference between idea-centered entrepreneurship and problem-centered entrepreneurship. And my point here isn't to say none of us should have really cool ideas, and Steve Jobs would have never succeeded if we said that, right? And there are plenty of other good examples of people who were just ahead of their time and ahead of the market. But most of us mere mortals don't have that intuition, and in fact, our intuition we repeatedly prove is wrong, which I think it defines insanity, right? So better to find out what problems our customer segment is most challenged by and solve that. And as a minimum, it's a really good way. And again, this friend of mine just sold a business for $130 million. That seems pretty good. That's not a bad, somebody said it was valuable. So my recommendation is simplify the business model canvas quite a bit. And until you've really validated that you've got a problem worth solving for a very specific customer segment, don't move on to any other parts. Because again, all you're doing is wasting time and money. And figuring this out isn't that hard. It takes a different, we're kind of in a social media mode where we think we can just send out surveys and get all the information we want. And we have to really roll up our sleeves. We have to get in and sort of live with our customer and really understand where they're most challenged, and then obviously work to solve those big challenges. So it's a little different mode maybe, because again, all we want to do is build stuff, right? I have this great idea, I'm so smart. But we kind of prove that often, we prove that's not the case. So really simple, the only place where investment generally comes before sales is in the dictionary. Most of the time, investment comes after sales. Again, we want to de-risk, we want to build the team's confidence, we want to build that traction, and so on. So again, from the boat ride and the tens of other boat rides that I've done here in Istanbul, it's kind of the same story. We'll be really successful once we have investment, and that's giving up control to someone else. You control this outcome that the investor doesn't. That may be a really good help, and there are definitely businesses here that will be investable, but that, again, the real tough work is up to you, and you have to get it done in order to get to that opportunity. So a bonus thought, because you need a bonus, right? You guys have been good, you've been very patient, and you actually need some sugar. I've got to give you just a little bit here. So the bonus thought is, who here cooks pancakes? Okay, so you get to an event like this, and probably some of you are feeling a little anxious. You have to stand up in front of a good-sized room full of people on Monday and pitch, and it's kind of wherever we are. I mean, we're never 100% prepared for anything, and we're all at different stages in comfort in terms of speaking in front of a room full of people and all that kind of stuff. So if you're familiar with cooking pancakes, you know that there's a difference between the first pancake and all the rest of them, right? What's the deal with the first pancake? They suck. Yeah, they just suck, right? I mean, and I've been cooking pancakes for 40 freaking years. I can't cook a good first pancake. It doesn't happen, right? Sort of the idea here is you need, in order to cook a good pancake, you have to cook bad pancakes. And it is a part of the process of cooking pancakes. In order to pitch well, you have to pitch poorly. If I stood up here and did a pitch, it would just be a pancake. I'd be putting it on the griddle, and you all will have the same experience. Wherever we are is where we are. Don't worry about that. Worry about just enjoying the process. Connect with the audience. That's really the hardest part. When you get by that, because you're competent, you know what it is you do, you know a lot of the information that you should know. It's really, the harder part is sort of performing it, right? Is standing up and doing it. So don't worry about it. Sometimes there are throwaway pancakes. It's okay. You'll cook better pancakes as you go, but you only get to cook better pancakes if you cook bad ones. So just whatever it is, it is. And you know, if we have to eat a crappy pancake every once in a while, we got to do it. So just enjoy it, smile, have fun, take the cheer from the audience. That's all good. So good stuff. So this is me. Here all week. Tip your waiters. So are there? I've got a couple of minutes. Are there questions? Anything that I can? 5 thoughts. Did it make sense? Are you all angry? Do you want your money back? Okay. Well, I'm going to bring up our next speaker. I really appreciate your attention. And Ella here is going to give me a little information. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you. So, actually, I'm really looking forward to this. Do I need to advance this? Oh, I guess I just go to blank screen. So, cool.